Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Monday morning. I guess it's technically 12:02 on the East Coast. And we're just thrilled to celebrate National Apprenticeship Week with you all. If you're not familiar, the U.S. Department of Labor has hosted a National Apprenticeship Week for 10 years now. This is the 10th anniversary. And it's just meant to be a celebration of the expansion and advancement of apprenticeships across the US. And this year, youth apprenticeship is the theme of the day for Monday. So, in honor of that, our team at PIA is excited to walk through the fundamentals of youth apprenticeship. Carly, can we go to the next slide, please? So, about us, I'll be joined in a minute by my colleague Lancy Downs, Senior Policy Analyst at the Center on Education and Labor at New America, to walk through the technical components of a youth apprenticeship program. But just to start off about us, if we haven't met yet, my name is Ivy Sullivan. I'm the manager of the Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship Network, and we'll get into what the network is in a second too. But just to level set who we are and what PIA is, New America is a nonprofit, nonpartisan public policy think tank and action tank based in DC. And in 2018, New America launched the Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship, which we call PIA, and continues to serve as its lead partner. Our colleague Taylor White is the Director of Post-Secondary Pathways for Youth at New America, and she was one of I call her like a founding member of PIA in 2018, and she still is the director of the program. Unfortunately, she got stuck at the White House at a very cool apprenticeship event that we're super glad she got invited to, and we're not jealous at all that she's there. But we've been told that there will be lots of photos on social media and some videos too of the youth apprentices that are gathering at the White House today to celebrate National Apprenticeship Week. But enough about them, about us. Next slide, please. We are the Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship. New America is the lead partner, and we work with all the organizations on the screen here who are our fellow partners. And together, we just coordinate our efforts. So that can look like providing pro bono technical assistance to our network members, hosting webinars like this one for the public, and publishing reports to share our latest findings and best practices on how to run effective youth apprenticeship programs. And I should say at the top, when we talk about youth, we're talking about high school age youth plus anyone ages 16 to 24. So this is a great national effort, and we have a couple of learning hubs that we work with as well in Charleston Regional Youth Apprenticeships and with CareerWise that has offices across the country. Next slide, please. So together, the partners support place-based partnerships to increase the number of programs that meet our definition of high-quality youth apprenticeship programs. We also facilitate learning and innovation through different academies and cohorts and meetups with folks that run apprenticeship programs across the US, across a number of industries. And we work to strengthen the case for youth apprenticeship. And being in DC, that's pretty easy for us to be close to the lawmakers that are making these decisions at a federal level. So a little bit about PIE and its history. Next slide, please. We, in 2018, in the spirit of this partnership and sharing best practices, PIA welcomed applications for different organizations across the US to receive grants from PIA. And through that process, I think they were expecting to give grants to maybe 5 or 6 programs, ended up giving grants to 9 actually. And in that process of reviewing applications, there were so many incredible programs and partnerships across the US that they didn't want to lose out on keeping in touch with all the folks that are doing great work in different states and regions. So next slide, please. Paya then created the Paya Network, which I'm the manager of. And that includes our grantees that receive funding from Paya, plus a number of different organizations in the purple and yellow and orange here that all contribute their insights, they share data, and they um, help one another solve different issues they may run into in running an apprenticeship program. So that was a lot about Paya and what we do. And going back to the focus of our chat today on youth apprenticeship, and to give us some common language we can use during our Q&A later, we'd love to go into some basics about what all these terms mean and deciphering, apprenticeship and how youth tie into that. So next slide, please. Thanks so much. So, what is apprenticeship? So, in the United States, the Department of Labor has a national system of registered apprenticeship programs. And there's actually a really cool, a bit wordy, but really cool catalog of all the different apprenticeship programs that are registered with the federal government. And it shows exactly how many hours of on-the-job learning each student, each learner must receive. And on-the-job learning can look like, maybe they're learning how to use Photoshop on the job with a mentor, or they're taking an online course to learn the basics of Photoshop, or they're also and they also earn like credits for classroom training, and it must include paid progressive wages. And registered apprenticeship programs must also culminate in a nationally recognized credential. So that's really anything like a diploma or a certificate. And having that credential is really important to us, so that learners can come out of the apprenticeship program with more skills than they went into it, and they can take that credential to the next job or continue working with their employer after they complete the program. Next slide, please. So another term that you might come across in Googling youth apprenticeship is this concept of a pre-apprenticeship. This is a way broader definition. There isn't a federal definition of what a pre-apprenticeship program is, but typically they're shorter than a registered apprenticeship program. They're focused on basic skills and are usually step one for young people to then apply for a registered apprenticeship program in the same industry. So these are a bit more ambiguous. Sometimes they're paid, but not always. Sometimes they lead to earning a credential, but not always. So as you can imagine, with this very broad definition, there are a lot of different programs that fall into this bucket. And we acknowledge it here because it's just a common misconception that youth apprenticeships are pre-apprenticeship programs, but really we like to distinguish a high quality youth apprenticeship program as including specific metrics that we'll get to in a minute. And another item to add here, that internships are also not pre-apprenticeship programs, and we'll have a chance to talk through that in our Q&A today. But internships don't guarantee any of these things, right? I think we all have had a summer internship or know of someone who's had a summer internship where they didn't learn skills and they didn't receive pay and they didn't receive a credential, and maybe they were just sitting in an office organizing files, and that's not really a meaningful experience, especially for a young person. Next slide, please. So in thinking about youth, young people ages 16 to 24 can participate in registered youth apprenticeship and in pre-apprenticeship programs. but it's worth noting that learners must be 16 years of age or older to participate in a registered apprenticeship program. And as we mentioned earlier, there's no federal definition for pre-apprenticeship programs. So there's no guarantee that this will really be a meaningful opportunity for learners. And another note that registered apprenticeship programs, they're fantastic career pathways and mechanisms to help more people access economic mobility, but they're not designed with young people in mind. We might think of an apprenticeship in the skills trades, like an electrician's apprentice. That's going to be a full-time job. It's not necessarily possible for a high school student to then be in a full-time apprenticeship program. That's not compatible with their life. And if we think about a pre-apprenticeship program, that's not designed with youth in mind either, especially if there isn't paid work guaranteed. A lot of students are deciding between working at the store down the street and earning a wage and saving up a little bit for college versus taking an internship program that would be, helpful to build their skill set. And just to get rid of that equation altogether, we believe that apprenticeship programs should be paid work-based learning opportunities. So I threw a lot at you there, but I would love to pass the mic over to my colleague Lancey Downs, who will get into the specifics of all the different terms there and share with us a little bit about the different components of youth apprenticeship. Lancey?
Awesome. Thank you, Ivy. Hi, all. Very glad to be picking up the torch here from where Ivy left it off. My name is Lancey Downs. I'm a senior policy analyst on the PIA team. And I am tasked with telling you a little bit more about youth apprenticeship. So Ivy has told you about the registered apprenticeship program, registered apprenticeship system in the US. She's talked a little bit about pre-apprenticeship, and she's noted that neither of those systems, neither of those programs are really designed to cater to youth and the specific needs young people have. And so PIA, you can stay on the, well, it's fine. You can keep put the slide up. Recognizing that these two pretty common models were not necessarily designed to serve young people, PIA developed our own definition of the term youth apprenticeship. And this definition is designed to preserve the most important parts of registered apprenticeship, while also allowing for flexibility to accommodate the unique learning needs and time constraints young people also face. So we have the definition up on the screen here, and I'm going to walk you through it. I know it's sort of a lot of words here, but I'm going to walk you through it, and hopefully we can all unpack it and understand it together. So the first sentence here is a reference to apprenticeship sort of in general as a learning model. And so the definition opens with: apprenticeship is a proven education and workforce strategy that combines paid, structured, on-the-job training with related classroom learning. That is a reference. So that includes things like the registered apprenticeship program, but you also can see apprenticeship in lots of other countries. Apprenticeship as a term just refers to this training and workforce strategy. Youth apprenticeship is a really very specific model for young people. So youth apprenticeship is a structured work-based learning program designed to start when apprentices are in high school. PIA also says that high-quality youth apprenticeship programs are built on partnerships that include employers, high schools, and providers of post-secondary education. That's usually a community college. We'll talk a little bit more about what those partnerships look like later on today, but I just want to walk you through these 4 bullet points below, which are sort of the core of the definition. These are the 4 elements that need to be included in a youth apprenticeship, in a program for PIA to consider a youth apprenticeship. So the first piece is the paid on-the-job learning under the supervision of skilled employee mentors. I will point to the fact that this element specifies that apprentices must be paid. So if somebody tells you they're running a youth apprenticeship program where the participants do not earn wages, that is not a program PIA would consider to be a youth apprenticeship. That the paid portion, the earning of a wage, is really crucial to something being considered a youth apprenticeship. The second piece is the related classroom-based instruction. You might hear this abbreviated in a bunch of different ways. Sometimes it's RTI or related technical instruction. Sometimes it's related supplemental instruction or RSI. Sometimes it's just related instruction. That all refers to the same thing. It's the classroom-based learning that's connected to the apprentice's occupation. So it's the learning they're doing in a classroom that's basically directly tied to the learning they're doing on the job. In youth apprenticeships, generally, the related instruction is being delivered either by high schools, by post-secondary partners, so often community colleges, or some combination of both, depending on the design of the program. Bullet number 3 is the ongoing assessment against established skills and competency standards. So this essentially means that apprentices are being evaluated against a set of skills that have already been decided. Usually they're sort of an agreed upon set of skills that the industry as a whole has sort of said these are the necessary skills to enter into this industry or career field. So they're not just sort of randomly being evaluated on a set of standards that aren't commonly understood. And then the last piece is a really, really important one. It says that a youth apprenticeship must culminate in a portable, industry-recognized credential and in post-secondary credit. You might have noticed when Ivy put up the slide with the list of requirements for a registered apprenticeship program, it culminates in an industry-recognized credential, but it doesn't necessarily culminate in post-secondary credit. So you might be wondering, why does PIA's definition require both the industry recognized credential and the post-secondary credit? And that's basically because PIA believes that youth apprenticeship should expand rather than limit a young person's post-secondary opportunities. You might have heard youth apprenticeship referred to as an options multiplier. That basically means that we want youth apprenticeship to be the kind of program where when a young person is done with it, they have more options for what to do next than they did when they started. So leaving the program with both college credits and with the industry recognized credential gives them options to pursue higher education full-time, work full-time, some combination of both. If they only got one, it would limit those options. I'll also note that while it's not stated explicitly in this definition, PIA also believes that the post-secondary credit earned during an apprenticeship should be applicable towards an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, and it should be transferable to other post-secondary institutions. So that's the 4 core elements of the definition. Just a couple things to note before we move on. It's possible to meet this definition with a registered apprenticeship program. You'll notice that this is similar to, but not entirely the same as the standards in a registered apprenticeship program. PIA does not require a youth apprenticeship program to be registered, but they can be. And it cannot, and a very high quality intensive pre-apprenticeship program might also meet this definition, but it would have to be designed pretty intentionally to make sure all of these pieces are met. I'll also note about this definition, this is not a legal definition. This is definition PIA came up with to provide guidance to the field, to provide guidance to youth apprenticeship programs and stakeholders around the country. There is no federal definition of youth apprenticeship. There's no definition that the Department of Labor has issued that's in federal law. It doesn't exist. That's part of why we came up with this, to help provide some guidance because there's no federal definition. That said, there are state definitions of youth apprenticeship. About half of all states have some sort of definition of youth apprenticeship, either in their state statutes or in their regulations. And while most of them contain some of the elements of PIA's definition, they very rarely include all 4. So it's very possible that you might be dialing into this call from a state that has its own definition of youth apprenticeship on the books. And it just, for your awareness, the way your state uses the term youth apprenticeship might not be exactly how PIA is using the term youth apprenticeship. So it's just good to be aware of the distinction and what the requirements are that PIA has to ensure a program is super high quality that a state definition might not necessarily include. Okay, that's definition. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So this is sort of like, in a way, part 2 of the definition. This is PIA's guiding principles for high quality youth apprenticeship. PIA stands behind our definition. We think it's great, but we also know that it's not enough to necessarily guarantee a super strong, super high quality program. And so we also have these 5 principles that we think are the quality criteria programs need to meet to deliver value to both employers and to students and to any other stakeholders in a youth apprenticeship program. And I'll walk them through with you here quickly so you can get a sense of what we're talking about with all of these. The first one is career oriented. The text here refers to the fact that learning is structured around knowledge, skills, and competencies that lead to a career with a family supporting wage. The idea with this one is that youth apprenticeships shouldn't be preparing a young person for a dead-end job, a job where there's no growth or trajectory. It should be preparing them for a career where they can make enough money to support their family. Principle 2 is about equity. So the idea here is that youth apprenticeships should be accessible to every student, and that there should be sort of some targeted supports built into the programs for young people who have been adversely impacted by longstanding inequities in our education system and in our labor market. That one really filters into every aspect of program design, and so building a program that has equity sort of built into it from the start rather than as an afterthought is sort of a key component of youth apprenticeship from Paya's point of view. Our third one here is about portability. So this kind of goes back to what I was saying about post-secondary credits in the youth apprenticeship. Paya believes that youth apprenticeships should lead to post-secondary credentials and transferable college credit that expand options for students. So again, this is sort of the options multiplier idea that students should be able to sort of take their learning lots of different places. It should come with them as something they've earned rather than just limiting them to one place. Adaptability is sort of a little bit of a similar idea, but kind of on the industry side of things. So the idea is that in a youth apprenticeship, young people are learning something that isn't just valued at the one employer, at the one job they have, but that is collaboratively recognized and valued across an industry or sector, so that when they're done with their apprenticeship, if they are choosing to go on to another employer, their skills and experience will be valued by that employer as well. And then last but not least, accountability. So this is the data one, essentially. So the idea here is that student, employer, and program outcomes are monitored and shared publicly. So programs can be transparent about their metrics, and young people and employers can understand how the program is working for them and for their peers. Okay. So we've thrown a lot at you about what this all means sort of in theory. And Carly, if you can pull up the next slide, I want to talk you through what this looks like in practice. So you can sort of see how all of these different pieces fit together. This infographic here is called Visualizing the Youth Apprentice's Journey. It illustrates the components and sequence of a pretty prototypical youth apprenticeship program. Not all programs will look exactly like this, but this is sort of an example of what one might look like. And hopefully it will help you visualize sort of how all of these different pieces I've mentioned come together in practice. So if we start at the top left of the screen where that white arrow is pointing down, this is where the youth apprenticeship journey begins for high school students. They typically begin a youth apprenticeship in 11th or 12th grade. And we see in these first couple of years that youth apprentices are completing their paid on-the-job learning. They're earning that transferable college credit through their college level coursework and their related classroom instruction. They are ultimately, after 2 years, graduating with their high school diplomas. And in this model, the youth apprenticeship continues into a third year after they've earned their diploma. The youth apprentice may spend that final year, that third and final year of the program, enrolled in both college courses and completing their apprenticeship. And that's where we sort of leave off at the end of the dark blue box that says college. So after year 3, they've completed their youth apprenticeship. They leave the program with 4 key assets. They have the transferable college credit and the industry recognized credential. They have their high school diploma. They have a professional network and mentors, and they have paid work experience. So 4 really crucial things that they're ending up with at the age of maybe 18, 19, 20 years old. And then the question is, so what comes next? What do they do after their youth apprenticeship? And as I said earlier, youth apprenticeship should be an options multiplier. So ideally, they are leaving very well prepared for a few different post-secondary options. Um, they can go right into the workforce full time. They can launch their careers. They've got valuable industry experience, knowledge, they've got connections, so they can just continue to work full time. Some may choose to enter a degree program full time and pursue a bachelor's degree, build on the credits they've earned through their apprenticeship. Oftentimes, young people, if they're staying with the same employer, their employer will pay for or subsidize their college coursework. And then option three is sort of a mixture of both. They can continue working part-time while continuing their education part-time or full-time. And as I mentioned, that often comes with the financial support of employers. Um, Not every high quality youth apprenticeship program is going to look exactly like this. So please do not freak out if you are thinking about or planning for a program that does not look exactly like what's on the screen here. This is just sort of a prototypical model. It's what it could look like. It's not a prescription for design, but you will notice that the key elements of the definition we talked about earlier are sort of woven throughout. Next slide, please. Okay, so one of those complex aspects of youth apprenticeship and working on youth apprenticeship is that there are three unique stakeholder groups who need to come together to cooperate, collaborate, to run a program. And those groups are those three icons at the top. We have K-12 school systems, we have employers and industry, and we have post-secondary education providers, which, as I mentioned earlier, are usually a community college. These three partners are critical to any youth apprenticeship partnership. You need the three of them to run a partnership. But in reality, most partnerships will often require collaboration among more than just these three. There'll usually be a couple other partners who are brought in some capacity. And I've listed those, we've listed those in the sort of array of colors below: unions, workforce boards, industry associations, community-based organizations, nonprofits. Those are just a few examples of the other types of partners we see in youth apprenticeship partnerships. Not all need to or do appear in every partnership. One of the really awesome things about youth apprenticeship is that it can be designed to be pretty customized and flexible to your community's needs and your partner's needs. So all of these partners don't appear in every single youth apprenticeship partnership, but they can, and there's usually a mix of some in each. But the three core partners at the top, they appear in every partnership. So we're going to talk about those today, and happy to answer sort of any questions about the others if you have them. So next slide, please. Okay, so I've told you who's involved, and now I want to tell you a little bit about what they actually do. So I'm going to start with the K-12 school systems because they are a related instruction provider, sort of first and foremost. High schools often will take advantage of existing course offerings that are sort of already in their curricula. Often they'll take advantage of career and technical education classes specifically to provide that related instruction. And the related instruction courses are a really important opportunity for apprentices to develop technical knowledge that they can then apply at the workplace. And you will not be surprised to hear, I'm sure, that there's a lot of coordination between the education system and the employers to make sure there's that alignment and to create seamless pathways for apprentices learning both in the classroom, on the job, and on the job. But related instruction is not the only thing K-12 schools do. They have an important role to play in providing youth apprentices with student supports. That includes around the academic elements of their apprenticeship to, for example, ensure that the young person is graduating with their high school diploma on time. Schools, K-12 schools, high schools often will facilitate, schedule adjustments so that a young person can complete their academic requirements while also having time to go work at their employer at their job site, often during the school day. And then last but not least, in many partnerships, the K-12 schools, the K-12 partner is often playing the lead in recruiting students to participate in youth apprenticeship programs. This can look like hosting information sessions or hiring fairs with employers. It might look like school guidance counselors and teachers encouraging their students to explore and apply to youth apprenticeship programs. But as sort of the direct contact with the students, K-12 schools have an important role to play there. The second key partner is employers. Employers play a really integral role in a youth apprenticeship partnerships. Their role is actually sort of what distinguishes them from other work-based learning opportunities. It's what distinguishes youth apprenticeship from other work-based learning opportunities where the employer might not be so central. In youth apprenticeship, the young person is an employee, so they are super central. To this program. They hire and employ apprentices, identify skills requirements, and build and implement training plans, including delivering the paid on-the-job training and the mentorship piece. And then our last partner is the post-secondary education providers. Like K-12 schools, they are also related instruction providers, and they, again, collaborate very closely with K-12 and employer partners to deliver that instruction and build out that coursework. They are also a super important part of that options multiplier piece. They are really key in ensuring youth apprenticeship programs are, in fact, options multipliers. And that's because the related instruction they offer results in transferable college credit that leads students to degrees. So it's really crucial that post-secondary partners are able to do that when they grant credit and credentials like certificates and degrees. So it helps ensure the program is an options multiplier. Okay. Throwing a lot at you. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so we've talked about these three core partners in youth apprenticeship. You might have noticed from these descriptions that these roles and responsibilities require a lot of collaboration with different partners. Some of the responsibilities overlap a little bit, and that is not always an easy thing to do because each partner in a youth apprenticeship has probably a different area of expertise. They have different ways of thinking and speaking about work-based learning, about training, about education. And so ensuring the partnership functions effectively and successfully requires one organization, usually called the lead partner or the intermediary, to play that convening and coordinating role for the three partners and for any other partners who are in we haven't talked about today. I'll note that this graphic is a little misleading because it makes it seem like the intermediary has to be a separate organization from one of the three core partners, but that's not necessarily true. In many partnerships, one of the three core partners plays that sort of lead partner role and does that sort of coordination translation work, which we will give you a little more info about in this next slide. So yes, what is an intermediary? As I said, a youth apprenticeship intermediary helps to sort of build out, launch, and run youth apprenticeship programs, working super closely and collaboratively with their partners. The intermediary plays a really important role in reducing the burden of any single partner organization and managing a youth apprenticeship to make them more realizable as a workforce training model. They do a lot of work to balance the needs and interests of employers, of education providers, and of the learners themselves, the apprentices. And then last but not least, they play a really critical translation role. And as I said, that's a super important one because oftentimes these stakeholders and partners are coming at this work from very different perspectives, very different areas of knowledge and expertise. So having somebody who is translating and working closely with everybody else to ensure everyone's needs are met is crucial to success. And next slide, please. So this is where I will leave you today. Basically, all I want to say here is, you know, this work of collaboration and coordination across stakeholders is really hard. It's not easy. And part of the reason it's so challenging is because it's essentially asking all of these stakeholders and partners to help create systems change. So youth apprenticeship, you know, as a model is asking employers and industry to really think about and invest in talent development and in young people in their communities in ways they may not have done so before. For K-12 schools, they're collaborating with industry, which is something they might not have done before. They're playing a key role in sort of building out very structured pathways that might look different from a traditional 2 or 4 year college degree, but that might still incorporate elements of that. So trying to figure out how to bring those pieces together is not always easy. And same with post-secondary institutions and community colleges who are giving credentials and valuing learning beyond the walls of their classrooms, which might require, again, collaboration with the industry in a way that they haven't done before. So that's what makes youth apprenticeship both so challenging and both so rewarding and so important, because it is bringing these disparate systems together in a way they have not done before in order to make sure young people have more accessible, structured, clear, equitable pathways to post-secondary education and careers. And that's where I leave you. So back to Ivy.
Thanks so much, Lancy. Really appreciate that. If we can go to the next slide, Carly. If you're like me and you like to do a little extra reading to help absorb when you receive presentations like this one, we have a couple of resources available to you. PIA actually has a resource library online at piaresourcelibrary.org that includes case studies and templates and worksheets that describe successful youth apprenticeship programs and also can serve as different like a procedure for how to start up a youth apprenticeship program or scale yours if you're managing one. So feel free to scan this QR code. We'll have it later in the presentation too if you're interested in checking out the PIA resource library. Next slide, please. Before we get into the Q&A, with our remaining time, we'd love to keep in touch with you as you're learning more about youth apprenticeship programs. If you are running a youth apprenticeship program or you think, oh, I might have fallen into this, pre-apprenticeship bucket, but I'm interested in catering my work towards bringing in young people. We have a monthly newsletter, which is just broadly covers the youth apprenticeship space. We share news in there, different state funding opportunities. If there are other webinars that our partners are hosting, other in-person events, regional meetups, we'll include that in the monthly newsletter. So feel free to sign up for that. And we're super excited to share that our network is accepting new members. Feel free to fill out this interest form by December 19th if you're interested in potentially joining the network. We'll host another webinar on December 5th to actually talk about exactly what it means to be a network member. But I just wanted to note here for the sake of time that becoming a member and participating in the network is entirely free. PI is entirely funded by grants, thanks to our incredible PIA Funder Collaborative, which includes the Annie Casey Foundation, Bloomberg Philanthropies, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Carnegie Corporation of New York, JP Morgan Chase & Co., the Siemens Foundation, Harbor Freight Tools for Schools, and the Walton Family Foundation. None of this work would be possible without them, so we thank them for supporting us. And so we'd love for you to join the network if you're interested. But otherwise, you can go to the next slide and get into your questions from the Slido. So if you have other questions, feel free to drop them in. We saw a few roll in earlier while Lancy was speaking. We will hold off on talking about the specifics of the PI network because that would be a whole other hour. But join us on the 5th if you want to get those details. But we would love to, just get into your questions about youth apprenticeship. So, Lancy, if you don't mind, maybe we can start by digging into this idea of an internship first. Can you help us understand the difference between youth apprenticeship and an internship program?
Sure. If we could go to slide 26, we have a handy little graphic to help you all understand this a little bit better because it's a question we get all the time. What's the difference between a youth apprenticeship and an internship? Let's just start by saying, first of all, there are lots of very good internship programs out there, and they can be a really valuable option. But they are also, as our director Taylor likes to say, the Wild West. They can be paid or unpaid. They can be 2 weeks long, 2 months long, 2 years long. There's just a ton of variability in internships. Because youth apprenticeship and apprenticeship is a more defined training model, there are just more guarantees built into the program. And at PIA, we believe this offers not only transparency, but also more valuable for learners and employers alike. So, for example, apprentices are paid. They are employees and like official, real employees on day one. And that means they're earning a wage. Not all interns earn a wage. Lots are unpaid. Some might earn like a stipend or get paid for like their to cover their transportation, but they don't necessarily earn a wage. And this obviously has lots of equity implications, right? Many students cannot consider unpaid internships. They need to earn a wage to support themselves and their families, so they miss out on opportunities to expand their career horizons, promoting inequities that we would love to reduce here at PIA. Another key difference is that apprentices are enrolled in that classroom-based instruction, the related instruction. That's, as I said, often through high school CTE courses. It's through dual enrollment sometimes. And that gives them a chance to tie what they're learning at school directly to what they're learning on the job. Applied learning is super effective for teenage brains, and internships are not typically linked to coursework in that way. And then apprentices are also learning specific skills at work. They have that mentor who's helping train them. And most interns are mostly there to shadow, learn through observation. They're not necessarily required to be given clear direction and standards against which they and their employers can measure their progress and growth. And then last but not least, apprentices, as I have noted, hopefully many times now, will earn that credit, that post-secondary credit. They'll earn a credential, which puts them in a transition to directly work afterwards or to accelerate their progress towards a degree if they go that route. Interns might get course credit instead of wages sometimes, but they rarely earn credentials, industry recognized credentials or credits that count towards something major that's recognized in their field. So, again, both models can be valuable, but we think youth apprenticeship as a structured, defined pathway has just greater potential to deliver value to young people and to employers who are investing time to hire and train them.
Thanks, Lancey.
Yep.
If we could go back to the question slide, Carly, just so people have the QR codes. Another question that popped in here, are there grant funding opportunities available for youth apprenticeships in public school districts? Lancey, my initial thought is that public school districts should look to their state level funding, regional sources, their workforce boards. We're seeing a growing number of investments at the state and local level in different workforce development programs, and there tends to be some overlap with apprenticeships there. And just thinking about if I can tease your 50 state scan that's coming out in the next week, wanted to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start. It's also worth noting that the federal government just made a whole bunch of grants this summer, I think about $200 million in grants to support the expansion of apprenticeship. A lot of those grants are really specifically focused on youth apprenticeship or pathways for young people from pre-apprenticeship into registered apprenticeship. So those are called the State Apprenticeship Expansion Formula Grants and the ABA 2 grants, which are Apprenticeship Building America grants. So it's worth checking out if your state or if an entity in your state received either of those grants and if there's a way for you to tap into that funding model. Youth apprenticeship WIOA dollars can be put towards youth apprenticeship for students who qualify and are enrolled in WIOA. So that's something to consider as well. And different states might also have their own funding mechanisms for youth apprenticeship. There's not really, I would not say that very few states have funding that's dedicated solely to youth apprenticeship, but there are a lot of options. Youth apprenticeship kind of is a qualifying model for lots of different funding streams. So it's worth checking out what is available in your state that young people in apprenticeship can qualify for.
Great. That's really helpful. And just thinking about our programming with the PIA network in 2025, that's something we want to dig into, just the different funding opportunities available for either apprenticeship intermediaries or these different partners that are collaborating to run a youth apprenticeship program. So another question from the chat, might actually merge two of them. Um, Lancy, do you find greater success when the intermediary is a third party versus the K-12 or college or industry partner serving as that intermediary? And the part B is, are K-12 school systems in charge of recruiting employer partners? I think this person's just curious what role they have to play, especially since we know that teachers, educators, administrators are very busy, and that would be a heavy lift for them. So, what tends to be more successful?
I do not think that there's evidence either way saying one or the other is more successful. I think it really comes down to the needs of the partnership and of the community and of the apprentices sometimes. Um, I will say often it's helpful when the lead partner has sort of established credibility and a reputation in the community. I think that's something we hear from our partners a lot is like they know us and what we do, and that is helpful in terms of getting the word out and recruiting young people. So I don't think it necessarily matters who if you have a K-12 school as the lead intermediary versus an independent nonprofit as the lead partner or as the intermediary. I think it's mostly about making an intentional decision that works well for your stakeholders, works well for your partnership, and allows the responsibilities to be divided in a way that's sustainable for all partners. So that's my answer on that. And then the second piece was around employer recruitment and whether K-12 schools are responsible for that. I would say that typically no, if the lead partner is if the school is not the lead partner. So if a K-12 school is the lead partner, they might either play some role in employer recruitment, or they might play a role in giving that sort of delegating. That's the word I'm looking for. They'll delegate that responsibility to maybe like the Chamber of Commerce, who's a partner, or if they are working with a workforce board as a partner, they might sort of delegate that responsibility out and then be responsible for checking in with that partner to make sure they are actually doing what they said they would do. But K-12 schools, they can do it, but not necessarily required. Again, that's something I think can vary by partner, and the partner who is best suited to do that outreach is the one who should take it on, because that will sort of make life easier for the other partners in the partnership. And I've said the word partner 85 times in this answer.
There's so many partners, so many to organize and get aligned in the same direction. Thank you. Appreciate that. Is there usually an age limit for apprenticeships?
Great question. So for registered apprenticeship programs, um, the age cutoff is, I mean, the sort of you must be 16 years or older to do a registered apprenticeship program. I guess that's the simplest way of doing it. There might be some restrictions for occupations and hazardous industries where it has to be slightly over, but as a general rule of thumb, 16 and older for registered apprenticeships. PIA's definition, you will note, did not necessarily specify an age. We did just say they begin their program while they are in high school. Generally, as I said, it's 11th or 12th grade. So that usually means 16, 17, 18 years old that they're starting. And, if it's a 2, 3, 4 year program, they're finishing by their late teens, early 20s. I think for registered apprenticeship, there's no upper age limit. So like if you are 45 and want to do a registered apprenticeship, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. But there is sort of a base, you must be above a certain age to do a registered apprenticeship specifically.
And along those lines, we received another question. Is it possible to structure a program that learners complete in high school only? And I think there's a few ways that we could answer this question. I do think that a core component of our definition of a quality youth apprenticeship program is that it's meant to be a pathway that connects young people to post-secondary credits and to the workforce and work as an options multiplier, as we mentioned earlier. So Lansing, in my understanding, a high school only program would be something else. Maybe that's a career and technical education pathway, or it would have a different name. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it depends, I guess, on how the program is structured. I will say that like something we hear from our grantees and our network members is that that is often the hardest part for them is making the link in the program between the the K-12 system and the post-secondary system, so the link between the high school and the community college. I think I there are well-designed programs that end in high school that still incorporate that post-secondary credit. Either they do it through and usually they're doing that through dual enrollment. We have one partner in, or one PIA network member in Chicago, for example, that runs in suburban Chicago, District 214. I'll give them a shout out. They have a program that ends in high school. It's a registered apprenticeship program. It's competency based, which we didn't talk about a lot, which means they are doing an equivalent of 2,000 hours of training, but not necessarily exactly 2000, and it does end in high school, but they have a partnership with their community college where adjunct professors or professors who are sort of approved by the community college will teach the courses at the high school, so the young people are earning that college credit while they're still in high school. And it is portable and it can apply to a degree, towards a degree, but it doesn't necessarily require them to continue the program after they graduate high school. So yes, ideally, it's sort of a youth apprenticeship is the bridge between high school and what comes after high school, but it's not totally impossible to build a youth apprenticeship program in high school that ends before sort of at graduation time.
Oh, that's good to know. And then, yeah, maybe we'll end with a question that I know will inevitably lead us to more questions and guide our work in the new year. Can undocumented students participate in a youth apprenticeship program? And, Lansing and I have had lots of conversations about how to make sure that everyone can access a youth apprenticeship as a pathway to college and careers. And so this is one that's near and dear to our heart. But Lindsay, do you have initial thoughts there? I know that's something we want to unpack and kind of share best practices on in the coming months.
Yeah, so here's what I'll say. I think youth apprenticeship as a model is unfortunately like exclusionary in that sense because you have to be a paid employee in the program. So I should maybe say like registered apprenticeship specifically, and often youth apprenticeship. I saw there was a question earlier about the difference between sort of a stipend and a wage, and that's kind of one way to build a program that might look a whole lot like a youth apprenticeship program that isn't necessarily where the young person isn't necessarily a paid employee of the employer. Uh, you couldn't register it because they're not a paid employee, but there are definitely programs out there where a young person is paid a stipend for their work as just sort of an acknowledgement rather than of their participation rather than they're being paid a stipend for like the literal work they are doing. There are ways to do it where a young person might be a young undocumented person can be a contractor and they don't need social security number to do that. So there are ways to structure programs that might not necessarily meet every single criteria of a registered apprenticeship program or even PIA's definition of a youth apprenticeship program, but that are inclusive models for ensuring young undocumented people can have paid work-based learning experiences that are connected to classroom-based learning. We think youth apprenticeship is a valuable model, but we also recognize that the sort of the fact that young people have to be employees is inherently exclusionary. And so we are not like against models that are designed slightly differently to make sure they include undocumented young people. That's not something PIA like has a negative opinion of. So, youth apprenticeship is a great model. There are also lots of other great work-based learning models that can better serve certain student populations just because of sort of the inherent restrictions baked into an apprenticeship style program. But feel free to, I mean, I know there's like ways to contact us. If you have more questions about that, I'm happy to put you in touch with one of our network members who does a lot of work around ensuring undocumented young people can participate in these kinds of programs. And she's always game to talk. So if you would like to learn more, feel free to reach out to us about that specifically.
Great. Well, I think we're just about at time, but thank you everyone for joining us today. And just to underscore what Lancey said, there are a lot of, different components in our definition of what makes a high quality youth apprenticeship program. But we do that with the goal of inspiring and nudging the field towards meeting those quality metrics. There's lots of different programs that are doing fantastic work, and we're thrilled to, showcase and talk about. And the reality is that not every program is going to meet every single metric all the time. And so we like to think that we're welcoming people into the big tent of youth apprenticeship, even if they might technically be a pre-apprenticeship program or a different, have a stipend versus a wage, and have different components that match the needs of their community. Yeah, from there, we would again love to keep in touch. Feel free to subscribe to our newsletter. We're also available via email at paya@newamerica.org. And you can also check out our website, which is part of New America's website. And you can search Paya on New America's website and find us there. There's lots of questions in the chat we weren't able to get to, but would love to catch up over email. And maybe we'll see some of you on December 5th during our webinar on the Pi Network for folks that might be interested in joining us. With that, yeah, I think we'll wrap up our conversation today. Thanks again, Lancey, for walking us through different components of youth apprenticeship, and we're looking forward to keeping in touch with all of you. Thanks, everyone.